Thanks for staying with us. This is Newsline, and I've got a very special guest tonight, a very different guest, the former head of Mossad, the Israeli intelligence agency, Mr. Ephraim Halevi. Now, before the break, Mr. Halevi, we talked about a peace settlement. It's stalled now between the Israelis and the Palestinians over the issue of the settlement freeze. Now, a lot of people say, Mr. Halevi, and I want to hear what you think about this, that if there is an Israeli-Palestinian peace treaty, if the two, if a Palestinian state is created, it lives peacefully side by side with the state of Israel, then a lot of the terrorism that we have now will go away. Do you agree with that?
I think seeing is believing. But I think before we get a peace between Israel and the Palestinians, we have to see how long this is going to take. It's not just a question of signing a piece of paper.
No, of course not.
It's a question of implementing what's in that piece of paper. We have a government.
But Muslim extremists will lose a lot of support if there is a treaty, if there is a peace settlement.
They will lose a lot of support if the settlement is implemented. Then they will lose support. What I'm concerned about is the capability and the ability of the Palestinians to implement any agreement which they might sign.
You seem very pessimistic. Even before the break, you were wondering whether there actually can be a peace, whether they're ready for it, whether they want it.
Yes, I'm still not pessimistic, but I'm wondering about this. I'm realistic. And I would like to see signs that the Palestinians have got their act together, that they are a credible government, that they have the support of their people, that they have a credible system of elections.
But has Israel got its act together? Because there's also many different factions in Israel.
Israel has many different factions, but we have a government, we have a parliament, we have a majority in the parliament for the government. The government is willing and anxious to conduct negotiations. The government has the capability and the ability not only to sign a piece of paper, but also to implement whatever they will decide and they will undertake.
What about the religious right, the fundamentalists?
All the government has the capability of exercising its sovereignty on the entire population of Israel. Some people will disagree, some people will be unhappy, and we have the rule of law on our side, and we have an experience in this which goes back for many, many years. The Palestinians, unfortunately, do not have their act together. They are divided. The Palestinians, unfortunately, have not shown that they have this credibility of what I call nationhood. They they've not had the orderly elections. The last elections they had were in 2006.
You're saying they're not ready for nationhood?
I don't know. I'm not sure. But up to now, they've not shown that they're ready for nationhood.
I'm sure the Palestinians would disagree with you on that. But
why can't they go forward and have elections? Do you know how many times the president of the Palestinian Authority, Mr. Abbas, has promised elections for parliament, for the presidency? They should have had elections for the presidency more than a year ago. And they are stalled, not because we have stalled them, because he's unable to have an election process.
He's unable to because some people don't want it, and people don't want it because they point to Israel and says they're not doing the right thing. And that's why Hamas and people like that get the support from the people.
I don't agree with you. I think that a nation is built by the nation. It's not for Israel to build the Palestinian nation. It's for the Palestinians to build their nation. When we came to where we came, we built a system.
If you remove the blockade, if you pacify them, then maybe something like that will happen. There'll be more goodwill.
There was no problem for them to have an election in 2006, and we had many more roadblocks in 2006 than we have today. There's no reason for them not to have an election now, to elect a president, to elect a parliament, to have an orderly system of government. There's nothing preventing that, except themselves. And there is the problem. And that's what I'm worried about. Not whether we're going to sign a piece of paper, but where's their credibility to implement it?
Well, you know, something else I want to ask you about whether you worry or not, Mr. Halevi, is this. 9/11 must have changed the way intelligence agencies work, right? Including the Mossad. How has it changed it?
It's changed the perception and it's changed the list of priorities. Terrorism has gone to the top of the list. And the plethora of intelligence groups and cells operating is almost infinitesimal. Let me just give you an example. A few years ago, the director of the British Security Service, Dame Eliza Manningham-Buller, gave a public lecture in which, among other things, she said that at that time, A, there were over 2,000 people who had been identified one way or another who would be involved in terrorist activities. B, that they were having to oversee and to monitor people speaking 54 different languages and dialects, and that within the space of 2 or 3 years they had doubled the number of personnel in the service. This is not a quantity leap. This is a quality leap. And I would assume that by now maybe it's even trebled.
It's troubled. But
trebled.
Trebled. All right. Do you think 9/11 can happen again? Under
Yes.
the strictest securities we have, much stricter securities we have, flying in an aeroplane and so on. Why you say yes?
Because I believe that there are many ways to overcome many of the blocks which prevent terrorists from moving. Because I think that in order to be able to have a watertight control of what is happening, there has to be much more than there is today. Just for one example I will give you, a couple of years ago there were major exercises in main cities in the United States of America on the possibility of a nuclear event in those cities. They actually exercised it. They exercised the various services, the fire services and so on. They exercised television at that time as a media, because how do you communicate? How do you communicate to people when there is such an event? This is something which is on the agenda all the time.
Are you afraid it will happen again? Another 9/11 on the scale of 9/11?
I don't know whether it will happen, whether it will be a bigger scale or a smaller scale.
But you believe it is going to happen?
But I believe it could happen.
What
I'm
is
not a
Mossad
prophet.
doing about that? What is Mossad's inner workings about how to fight terrorism in that way?
Well, first of all, I'm no longer in the Mossad. I've not been there for the last 7, 8 years, and I never expressed opinions about what Mossad is currently doing. But my
you were
guess
there
is,
for 40 years.
I was there for 40 years, and my guess
You
is...
ran it for 4.5 years.
I ran it for 4.5 years. So my guess is, not my knowledge is, that they've probably put terrorism as one of the #1 subjects at the top of the agenda, that they are very busy recruiting sources. By the way, the type of source you need for intelligence on terrorism is an entirely different kind of source than you need for what was called traditional intelligence. When during the Cold War, the Russians and the Americans were collecting information on each other, they needed deep penetration of the other side and sources which could last for a long time. Here you need a source sometimes just for one act.
For one act. Okay, then tell me, if Mossad is supposed to be notoriously good, feared, how come you still can't catch bin Laden? He's been out there hiding, you know roughly where he is, nobody can catch him. Why is that?
I'm not sure that it's our mission or the mission of Israel to catch bin Laden.
Is Mossad trying to catch him too?
I don't know, but I think that bin Laden is first and foremost an enemy of the United States of America. He's
also your enemy.
We're #3 on his list.
Who's #1 and #2?
#1 are the United States of America, and #2 are the Saudis. We're #3. So I'm sure we are doing whatever we need to do. And
your #1 enemy is Iran. Do you fear a nuclear Iran, an Iranian nuclear bomb?
First of all, I don't fear it. I believe that Israel is indestructible. I don't believe that it is...
A nuclear bomb can destruct anything.
I said
destroy anything.
I said that I don't believe that Israel as a state is destructible. It's indestructible. Yes, the Iranians can inflict upon us very, very serious damage. I agree upon that. But I don't fear for the existence of the State of Israel. We're a very strong country.
Will you strike back with a nuclear attack? You have nuclear bombs which you've never admitted.
So I'm not going to admit it this morning either.
Are you going to admit it?
I say I'm not going to admit it this morning, okay? But what I'm saying is this. What Israel has in its arsenal is not just offensive weapons, but also defensive capabilities. People think that to throw a nuclear device is something very simple. You take an aircraft, you just take a nuclear device, you attach it somewhere on the aircraft, you send off the aircraft, and there it is. No, this is not the case. You need a very sophisticated system in order to do this, and you need all kinds of components in order to do this. And I'm not sure that the Iranians have their act in order yet. And my guess is that there's going to be a lot of soul searching in Iran before they actually cross the threshold, because they must realize that once they cross the threshold, the way the world will look upon them as a nuclear threat will no longer be a threat which is a theoretical threat. It will be a practical threat.
It'll be a real threat.
And the number of missiles that they are constructing and the range of those missiles do not relate to Israel necessarily. The range of the missiles they're creating have continents far beyond Israel within the range of these new missiles.
But you see them as your number one enemy. And they see you as that too.
No, they see us as their enemy, or the present regime sees us as their enemy. I don't think the Iranian people see us as their enemy. We've had relationships with the Iranian people over years which have been the most friendly. And I've met Iranians in the last couple of years in various conferences around the world, including Iranians who have served in government positions. And those Iranians tell me on the side, you know, we'd like things to change. Even one Iranian ambassador tugged my sleeve and said to me, you know, when the time comes, I'd like to be the first ambassador to come back to Jerusalem to present his credentials.
Let's hope we'll see that one day. But I've got 1 minute left. I'm going to end this show by asking you this. Mossad is as I said, one of the most feared intelligence agencies, recognized as one of the best in the world. You're in Hong Kong now, part of China. How do you rate the Chinese intelligence agency?
I think the Chinese are very, very effective.
In what way? How?
Because I think they serve the needs of the Chinese hierarchy and the Chinese government and Chinese strategic needs. What is the efficiency of an agency?
You're not answering my question. How good are they? I mean, in what way are they good?
Look, I don't think that I am a great expert on Chinese intelligence. I think they are very good because they have obviously effectively given their leadership the information that they need.
Is the CIA better than the Mossad?
I don't think we can compare. They are very big and we are very small. We have advantages which they don't have, and they have vast advantages that we don't have.
All right, we'll have to end the show right there. Thanks for watching Newsline. See you next week. Good evening.